2026 FIFA World Cup is finally underway. The open ceremony is taking place. First matches have been played. The first goals have been scored. And for billions of football fans around the world, the tournament we've been waiting years for has finally arrived. But despite the football finally taking centre stage, many of the biggest stories surrounding this World Cup are still happening away from the pitch. Visa controversies, human rights concerns, worker disputes, extreme heat warnings, ticket pricing debates, and questions over whether FIFA's biggest tournament ever has become too large to manage. Now, before we even start this video, this isn't a political rant, this is a football discussion. Everything discussed in this video comes from reporting by Reuters, FIFA statements, and major international news organisations. Now, my job isn't to tell you what to think. My job is simply to present the facts and ask one question. Now that the World Cup has begun, could the biggest story of this tournament still be everything happening around it? There's one man that won't be in this World Cup, and he was selected by FIFA himself. His name is Omar Artan, and until recently most football fans hadn't even heard of his name. But his story now has become one of the most talked about controversies surrounding this tournament. Artan isn't just another referee. In 2025, he was named Africa's Referee of the Year. After years of working his way through the African football, FIFA selected him for the 2026 World Cup. This wasn't just another appointment. Omar was set to be the first Somali referee ever to officiate at a FIFA Men's World Cup. A historic moment, not just for him, not just for Somalia, but for African football. But then everything changed. Now, despite holding a valid visa and FIFA accreditation, Artan was denied entry into the United States. US authorities cited vetting concerns. FIFA later confirmed he would not be able to participate in this tournament. His World Cup dream was over before it even began. Now, whatever your political view may be, that is an extraordinary story. One of FIFA's selected officials will not be able to take part in football's biggest tournament. While players are taken to the pitch and fans are filling the stadiums, one of FIFA's own selected officials is watching from thousands of miles away. Artan later described what happened as a matter of fate and urged Somalis to not lose heart. But remarkably, his story didn't end there. Just days after being denied entry into the United States for the World Cup, UEFA and CAF announced that Artan would officiate the UEFA Super Cup final between Paris Saint-Germain and Aston Villa this summer. And his story quickly became symbolic of a wider debate ahead of this tournament, because at the end of the day, Artan wasn't facing these issues alone. There were other people facing visa-related difficulties ahead of this World Cup. Reports highlighted visa complications affecting officials and support staff connected to the Iranian delegation, and Iran's Football Federation publicly criticised aspects of the process. Head coach Amir Galanoui described the situation as unlike anything he experienced before. But now it's important to be balanced here, because US authorities and tournament organisers maintain that players and necessary personnel have been granted entry. They insist the tournament remains open and welcoming. But the fact we're discussing immigration procedures and visa access during the opening week of the World Cup shows just how unusual this tournament already feels. Because at the end of the day, traditionally, the build-up to a World Cup is dominated by discussions about squads, tactics, injuries, potential winners, golden boot races. But instead, one of the biggest stories become who actually can enter the host nation. FIFA President Gianni Infantino has defended FIFA's handling of the situation, stating that immigration decisions ultimately belong to governments rather than football's governing body. The organisation can organise a tournament, but it cannot control the national immigration policies. And that's where the conversation begins to move beyond football administration and into a much wider debate. Now, over recent weeks, several human rights organisations have raised concerns about the environment surrounding this tournament. Reports have been highlighted describing this World Cup as a climate of fear. Concerns relating to immigration enforcement, border restrictions, journalists, fans, and civil liberties. Now again, these concerns are being raised, not proven outcomes. That's an important distinction. The White House and tournament organisers have rejected those concerns and insist visitors will be welcomed safely. But whether you agree with criticism or not, the debate itself is significant, because it shows how modern World Cups increasingly sit at the crossroads between sport and global politics. And while those debates continue off the pitch, another challenge has been developing behind the scenes. One involving the people who actually make the tournament possible. Because when you think of a World Cup, you think about the players, managers, fans, FIFA. But tournaments don't run themselves. Behind every match are thousands of workers. hospitality staff, security personnel, food vendors, ground crews, cleaners, caterers. Because in Los Angeles, labour disputes became a major talking point ahead of this tournament. Workers at SoFi Stadium voted to authorise a strike action shortly before kickoff. This dispute involved more than 2,000 workers. However, a tentative agreement was eventually reached before the opening matches. That does mean disruption has been avoided for now, but the fact negotiations reached this stage so close to the tournament highlights the pressure involved in staging an event of this scale. And speaking of scale, there's another challenge that could directly affect football itself. Extreme heat doesn't care about political opinions. It affects everyone: players, fans, officials, medical teams. Research has been found that with these likely conditions in this World Cup, a quarter of the matches could exceed heat safety thresholds that are recommended by the player welfare experts. Some matches could even reach conditions where postponement would normally be advised. Think about that. Players trying to perform at the highest level, fans sitting inside packed stadiums, teams competing in conditions that could affect their performance, recovery and safety. This isn't a theoretical problem, it's a football problem, and it raises difficult questions about scheduling, kickoff times and player welfare. Think about some of the biggest stars expected to play at this tournament. Players travelling thousands of miles between matches, recovering in different climates, playing in front of packed stadiums during the North America summer conditions. The concern isn't simply whether matches can be played, it's whether the teams can consistently perform at their best across an entire month-long tournament. Because if conditions become extreme, the football itself could change. Pressing intensity, recovery times, substitution strategies, and even match outcomes. And all this leads to perhaps the biggest question surrounding the tournament. Has FIFA simply made the World Cup too big? We all know that the World Cup is normally hosted by one nation, but for this World Cup, 3 host nations, 16 host cities, 48 teams and 104 matches, nothing like this has ever been attempted before. FIFA would argue that this is progress. More countries represented, more fans involved, more nations experiencing this World Cup, more opportunities for football to grow. But critics, they argue the opposite. More travel, more complexity, more logistical challenges, more opportunities for problems. But above all, there are football consequences too. Imagine a team playing in Mexico before travelling thousands of miles for their next match in the United States. Different climates, different altitudes, different recovery conditions, different time zones. Historically, World Cup has obviously always involved travel, but never on this scale. The first days of the tournaments have already shown the scale of this challenge. Take England, for example, starting out in Tampa, then coming down to Orlando, and then going all the way up to Dallas, Loads of miles are already in the tank in terms of the distance travelled. Even the fans are having to travel huge distances. So far, the football has largely gone to plan for FIFA, but the question is whether this remains true over the next month. Now on to ticket pricing. Reports have also highlighted concerns surrounding ticket pricing, after some matches have showed noticeable empty seats despite official attendances figures being really high. FIFA insists demands remain strong and points to millions of tickets being sold, but critics, they argue that rising prices risk putting the tournament beyond the reach of many ordinary supporters. The supporters who made it special in the first place. How can you make the World Cup bigger than ever while keeping it accessible to these fans? The World Cup is no longer approaching. It's here. The open ceremonies have taken place. The first matches have been played. The first goals have been scored. And the football is beginning to create stories that fans will remember. But alongside the football, the debates surrounding visas, immigration, labour issues, ticket pricing, human rights concerns, and the tournament logistics haven't disappeared. In many ways, they're only just beginning. Every World Cup has had controversy. Argentina in 1978, Russia in 2018, Qatar in 2022. And now 2026 has its own headlines. Maybe the real question isn't whether politics is becoming a part of this World Cup, because history suggests it always has been. But maybe the real question is whether the biggest World Cup ever can successfully balance football, politics, logistics, security, and fan experience. Because if it can, FIFA will point to 2026 as a landmark success. But if it can't, many of the warnings we've discussed today will only grow louder. Either way, this tournament is already making history, and the football has only just begun. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. And if you've enjoyed today's video on the breakdown of the biggest stories surrounding the World Cup, make sure to subscribe for more football analysis and discussions. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.